kijani kibichi o mazingira. Oh, shukrani ugatuzi kwa kutufungua macho. Tuna ujuzi hatuna kazi, tajitahidi na tulicho nacho. Oh, wananchi wenzangu, naomba mnisikilize. Nilikutana mtaalamu, oh, Profesa Bwisa, alikuwa mwenyekiti Kenya Invest, msomi wa ujasiriamali, akanambia niongee nanyi juu ya biashara ya kilimo.
I'm Professor Bwisa. I teach entrepreneurship at this college in the entrepreneurship department. I've been teaching it for the last 20 or so years. Entrepreneurship has not been well understood. I mean entrepreneurship as an agent of development. I also want to say that entrepreneurship is indeed a latecomer in academia. The teaching of entrepreneurship is pretty new, and I want to say this university pioneered on the continent of Africa to introduce entrepreneurship at master's level. Then we moved to PhD level, and now we have gone backwards and introduced at bachelor's level. Now, the fathers of entrepreneurship, Schumpeter, for example, were themselves economists. But they saw the gap that economics has in terms of development, and therefore entrepreneurship as a teaching subject was introduced. Entrepreneurship is close to economics. I would say they may be cousins, maybe brothers, maybe even be twins, but they are not identical twins. In entrepreneurship, we talk of innovation. Innovation is the pillar of entrepreneurship, and innovation means dynamism. Economics, the basic economics is equilibrium. The demand and supply laws meet in an equilibrium, and therefore it is what we call stability, which entrepreneurship kind of refuses. In other words, in entrepreneurship, the market forces do not matter. We are saying the entrepreneur is the visible hand in the market. Economics talks of invisible hand. Now, for that matter, therefore, for development, we need an entrepreneurship policy. Unfortunately, in much of Africa, entrepreneurship policy lacks. One of my students of PhD, Margaret, identified that gap and thought that we are using the term SME policy and entrepreneurship policy synonymously, and therefore retarding the actual contribution that entrepreneurship can develop. She did a lot of preliminary research, literature review, and indeed found, using the classroom knowledge theory that we've taught her, found that gap, which is true, that in Kenya, for example, we have an SME policy. We've had it for a long time, but we do not have an entrepreneurship policy. And therefore, under my supervision and my colleague, Professor Kihoro, we guided Margaret Baruguru to come up. Actually, to my best knowledge, it is the first research on entrepreneurship policy in Kenya, and probably continent-wise, because I've also done a lot of reading, a lot of research, and I found that that is a gray area. So Margaret went out to study the aspect of entrepreneurship policy and SME policy, and she came with very good results. I'm hoping that the results of this student can be used, then converted to a cabinet paper if need be, and we now generate an add-on policy on SMEs so that we now incorporate entrepreneurship as a policy in our development agenda. I want to hand you over to Margaret to talk a little bit about what she knows about entrepreneurship. Today is her big day. She's going to defend her PhD research findings on enterprise policy. So, welcome, Margaret Waruguru.
Hi everyone, my name is Margaret Waruguru. I've been a student of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology since the year 2006, where I joined the College of Human Resource Development as an undergraduate student pursuing Bachelor's of Commerce, and then moved on to my Master's in Entrepreneurship and finally PhD in Entrepreneurship. When I started off with the Master's in Entrepreneurship, I felt a bit lost because at this point you look at accounting for small enterprises, marketing for small enterprises, which felt like I was going to a lower scale compared to what I had done in Bachelor's of Commerce. But it was until I encountered Professor Bwisa who helped me understand what entrepreneurship was all about and how the small enterprises were impacting our economy. And this developed my passion for entrepreneurship to a very high scale. Entrepreneurship is one subject I love teaching. In fact, whereas many lecturers in the university avoid teaching entrepreneurship skills because it happens to be a common university unit and attracts a lot of students, but despite the number of students in each class, I enjoy teaching entrepreneurship skills, and this I give credit so much to Professor Bwisa, who has impacted my passion for entrepreneurship. Now, coming to my PhD thesis, my topic, which is an assessment of the entrepreneurship policy foundations for the youth, women, and wealth of funds in Kenya. Now, there seems to have been a lot of research that has been done concerning these funds, especially the youth fund and the women fund has attracted a lot of scholarly attention. But despite so many studies in this area, none of them ever looked at the policy that created these organizations. And it felt that there is a gap in this area, because how do you go about testing something which you really do not understand? When you want to look at the impact of the youth fund to the youth enterprises, does the fund has the capacity to have an impact on the youth enterprises? So my study went into looking at what is the policy that created these funds? Does it fit the prescriptions of an entrepreneurship policy that we find in literature? And so, guided by my supervisor, Professor Bwisa, and also borrowing heavily from scholars like Stevenson and Landstrom, who studied so much about entrepreneurship policies, I came up with 5 objectives for my research. One of them being to establish whether the process of formulation of the funds was entrepreneurial. Number 2 was to assess the motivation component of the entrepreneurship policies. Number 3, to assess the opportunity component of entrepreneurship policy in the funds. And number 4, to assess the skills component of the entrepreneurship policies, and finally to verify the policy typology that guided the establishment of the funds. Now, my study took a qualitative research approach where we are used to the cause-effect relationship, and even from my topic, it is clear that I do not have independent and dependent variables, because research on policy can only be approached best using a qualitative approach. And Therefore, instead of the normal conceptual frameworks that people are used to, I went for a conceptual framework for qualitative research, which is known as working hypothesis. And these, unlike the normal hypothesis, these are not to be tested, they are just meant to guide the investigation. And coming up with my findings, it was interesting. First of all, to establish that the process that guided the formulation of the funds was not entrepreneurial. This was based on some 5 steps I identified from literature, and looking into them and soliciting responses from the CEOs and the senior management of the 3 funds, I came to a conclusion that the process was not entrepreneurial. And it is worth noting that these funds are not made mention of in the sessional paper number 2 of 2005 on the development of micro and small enterprises, which was published in 2007, whereas the Youth Fund was established in 2006 and the Women Fund in 2007. The sessional paper number 2 of 2005 does not make mention of these funds. And again, the Vision 2030, which came into effect, we started undertaking the Vision 2030 from the year 2007. It also does not make mention of the 3 funds. It is until the second medium-term plan, which starts off from the 2013 to 2018, that mentions the 3 funds as flagship projects. Now, that tells a lot about the foundation of these funds, because even the respondents themselves, we are of the opinion that these are more of affirmative funds that were established to win political goodwill. And so when we go out there to find out the effect that the funds have had on the businesses, we may not find a lot, because the foundation of these funds seems faulty. On my objective number 2, on the motivation component, my research established that we do not have policy measures within the funds that address the motivation component. And when you talk about motivation, entrepreneurial motivation, we are talking about measures which have been put in place to encourage students to consider entrepreneurship as a viable career option, promoting a culture of entrepreneurship among the population, and developing an entrepreneurial mindset. I found no policy measures within the funds to address this, which is very sad. And also on the issue of the opportunity, which makes my third objective, the opportunity component within the funds. And I was able to establish that there are some measures within the funds which are meant to address the opportunity component. And when we talk about the opportunity component, we are referring to measures to reduce the administrative burden to the small enterprises, access to business support services, and also access to business finance. So that makes up the opportunity structure, and my study established that there are some measures within the funds to address this. On the skills component, again, the funds did not perform well, because my research established that there are no policy measures within the funds to address the skills component. And finally, on the policy typology that guided the establishment of these funds, my study established that these funds were guided by an E-extension policy as the major policy typology. And when you talk about the E-extension, we are talking about adding on to the SME policy. Now, there is a major big difference between an SME policy and an entrepreneurship policy. The SME policy addresses those people who are already in business. In fact, the clients are the enterprises themselves. Unlike the entrepreneurship policy, which addresses the individuals, and it starts from the nascent stage, that is the pre-start stage of a business. Before you consider getting into business, the entrepreneurship policy addresses people who are not yet in business and the people who are at the startup stage. They are starting out. So from my analysis, I found that we seem to be having more of the e-extension, where it's now adding on some aspects of entrepreneurship policy on the SME policy. You know, issues like now access to business support, training, and a few others that have been put in place. And also there is the bit of the niche or the target group policy, and that is where you see that the funds are reaching out to the women, youth, and the persons with disability. So my study concluded that the policy typology that guided the establishment of these funds was an e-extension policy. So finally, what does this mean to our country? What does this mean? It means that we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to go to the place where we started and look at our policies, because countries which have been able to prosper in as far as entrepreneurship is concerned are countries which have an entrepreneurship policy. A good example is Finland, which literature has what we call a holistic entrepreneurship policy. So for us to get to being a middle income economy, for us to get to a status of a developed economy, we must have an entrepreneurship policy if our country is to move forward. And so I call upon the policy makers within the government to get back to the place of looking at where did we miss the mark. Can we go back to that place and we rethink our policies which are meant to spur entrepreneurship in the country, and we redesign our approach so that we are able to reach out to as many Kenyans as possible. Thank you.
Asante Maulana, kuibariki Kenya yang'ara, tena kudongwa rotuba, kijani kibichi o mazingira. Oh, shukrani ugatuzi kwa kutufungua macho, tuna ujuzi hatuna kazi, tajitahidi na tulicho nacho.